Divorce is one of the most challenging transitions in life, and without the right guidance, it can quickly turn into a disaster. Welcome to Dodging Divorce Disasters, the show that helps you navigate the legal, financial, and emotional pitfalls of divorce before they happen. In each episode, I sit down with a top professional in the divorce community to hear real-life war stories, cautionary tales from the trenches of divorce. But I won't leave you with just the horror stories. The experts will break down exactly what went wrong and, more importantly, how you can avoid making the same mistakes. Whether you're in the early stages of separation, deep in the process, or supporting someone through it, we are here to help you move forward with clarity, confidence, and fewer regrets. I'm your host, Lori Hawkins, and I am a local expert in divorce real estate. I am so excited to be sharing these incredible professionals with you. Let's dive in. I am so excited today because I have Bethany Mulhern. Is that right? I pronounce your name. Every time I pronounce your name, I'm like, am I pronouncing it correctly? And I can't even think of how many years I've known you. You were like one of the first attorneys when I got into being a certified divorce real estate expert, that I think I sit down and had coffee with you and a coworker at a little coffee shop down near your place in Charlotte. And so I've known you for quite a while, but every time I say your name, I'm like, am I saying that name correctly?
No, you got it right.
Okay.
Yes, you got it right.
All right, perfect. All right, so what I want you to do is just kind of tell your area that you like, I know you do family law, you're an attorney, but like the company name, maybe the counties that you work in, if there's any kind of niche within family law that maybe you do, just anything that you'd want our listeners to know about you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I do remember having coffee with you. It was the first time we met, and I said, let's go to Sunflower because they have the best cheese biscuit in Charlotte. And anytime I have an excuse to go there, like I just want every cheese biscuit possible. And I'd never heard of a CMA prior to that. So when you'd reached out, I was like, yes, I don't know what this thing is. And it's like something new I can tell my clients about. So I loved meeting you. Okay, so my name's Bethany. And I have been a family law attorney exclusively since 2018. I love my job. It's stressful, but it's so fun. Every day is something completely new. I work at Miller Cushing Holiday. We've been through a couple different names, but we are proud and I love it. Everyone there is fantastic. It's like my home. I love it so much. Everyone is just so incredible. We are a firm that does exclusively family law. So we don't do anything else. We just do family law, which is great because I feel like it is really just our specialty. So we only do family law and we're in North Carolina only. We don't have anyone that's in South Carolina. So we're predominantly, most of us are in Mecklenburg.
Okay, I always like to start with a fun fact, and I love what you wrote down. There was a couple things. One, you are a dog mom to 3 dogs. What kind of dogs do you have, and what are their names?
My dogs, a love of my life. They rule my life. They rule everything about my life. I have 3 dogs, Indiana, Jackson, and Logan. Indiana and Jackson are both 13 and a half. So we're getting to be senior dog life. Jackson we rescued him when we moved down here, and he's just like the love of my life. He's my soul dog, and he's got a lot of health problems. And so I actually just bought a stroller for him, but he's 65 pounds. So it's not like one of those like baby strollers. Like when you go to Sam's Club and you have like those kind of industrial carts, it's like one of those.
Oh my gosh, that must be so heavy.
It's not light, but he loves it. And he's just like so happy to be outside because he can't really walk anymore.
So that's why you take him on walks, is in that stroller?
It is. I don't want him to miss out.
Your neighborhood is flat.
It's not. It's like a good calf workout for me.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And then Logan's our youngest. He's 6.5, and he's a purebred German Shepherd and has every characteristic of a German Shepherd. He's a crazy and he's a nut job. And we were like, at some point he's going to like calm down. And honestly, he's never been like rambunctious, but he is still such a goofy puppy. And he's great. We love it. So my dogs rule my life. They are.
Most people that are dog people are like that. I mean, it was the same. My dog that I had, he's passed away now, but I always call him my firstborn. because
Hmm.
he was my first son, even though I
Yeah.
only had 2 children. I say I had 3.
Yeah.
Well,
I
then
grew up with dogs and I
yeah,
grew up with girl dogs. And it wasn't until I got Jackson that I had a boy dog. And there's a big difference. And I will probably only have boy dogs. So,
never see, I grew up with dogs too, and we only had male dogs. So
mhm.
I have never I've always been scared to have female dogs because of all the other little stuff that you have to do without getting too graphic on here. And I thought, I don't wanna have to do all that. So we always had male dogs.
Mhm.
But see, that's how much your childhood influences you, right?
Yeah.
Um, okay, speaking of a good calf workout, taking the
Yeah.
dog around, you said that in Division II, in the North Carolina AA division, you were an athlete for track and cross country?
Yes. So actually, I went to school in Pennsylvania. I'm a Southern transplant. I'm a proud Northern girl. I grew up in Pennsylvania, moved down here, I think it was 2016. So almost 10 years, which is kind of crazy to me.
Mhm.
It just went by so quickly. And so I did like my undergrad up in Pennsylvania. That's where I'm from. And then my law school I did in Delaware. But when I was in undergrad, I was an athlete and I ran Division II and I did track and cross country.
Wow, that is so cool. That is so cool. And you said that you feel like it helps you to kinda connect with the school and the extracurricular activities and stuff
Yeah.
when you're working on the child custody cases and all of that kinda stuff.
Yeah, I think it's given me a really cool perspective on it. I loved being a student athlete. So from the standpoint of like kiddos going to college and maybe doing student
Mhm.
athletes, I feel like I have a cool perspective on that too. But when we're talking about kids in sports, when we're talking about kids, clubs and soccer and baseball and all that cool stuff. I think you get parents who are wanting to put their kids in everything, parents who say maybe only one or two. You really have like the whole spectrum of what parents want to do with their kids. And I can appreciate the athletic part of it just because I
Yeah.
grew up with it. I mean, from the time I was like 3, I was in soccer and then running. So just I really can appreciate the time and the effort and the money into it and kind of like the payoff at the end too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, I wanna jump into it's the whole podcast, dodging divorce disasters, because I know as a family law attorney, all of you have a million stories. And the main reason I liked doing this podcast is for y'all to share something that, a client or something has run into that maybe if it had been handled maybe differently, or you have some practical advice on how they could dodge this specific divorce disaster. It's kind of tongue twister, that alliteration. Do you have something that you can kind of share with the listeners?
I have a lot of some things, a lot
Okay.
of that I
I,
can't share with the listeners. I
hopefully you
think that's
do.
for most of us.
Just pick some.
Yeah, we've always got a ton. It's just a matter of what we can share and what we can't share.
Exactly. I
So
understand that.
today I know we're talking about all back to school stuff. So
Mhm.
it's my favorite time in Charlotte when my 10-minute commute becomes 50-minute commute. So we're doing all back to school. And so I did have one case who their custody order said that if they couldn't decide on a school, they had to arbitrate the decision. And the kiddo was kind of aging out of middle school, going into high school, and we had to pick a school. And it was like a week before school started and they like could not decide. And so we had to like get into arbitration ASAP to get somebody to decide this. And then the kiddos, we had to get them enrolled in the school. And it was sort of a disaster because we're talking about like a 1 week time frame to get everything done. And for most schools, like some schools in CMS have a lottery or you have to kind of be
Ugh.
enrolled previously. And so I know one of the options they really wanted the kiddo in, we couldn't even get him in there because it was way past the enrollment date and it was just too late. They did everything too late. And that it really did turn into kind of a disaster because we're just going full force trying to get all of this done. Couldn't even really do the first choice of school. And had they sort of looked at their custody order maybe like during the summer and realized like the process that they had to go through because they had this custody order for several years and it really did work for them. They just really couldn't decide on which school the kiddo went to. And I got the case kind of at this point and I was like, oh my gosh, I wish we would be like 2 months previously.
Mhm.
And just to get an arbitrator, like within a week, everyone's really booked up. So we're calling and I'm calling in favor. So I'm like, hey, I really need an arbitration like ASAP. So that was one that was super stressful for me just because we had to get done really quickly. But also, I mean, for the parents, they had to like rush and do all this. And then also for the kiddo, he doesn't know where he's going to school and where his friends are and what he's going to be doing. And so that's one where it's kind of always sticks with me where I'm very proactive with my clients, especially kiddos that are transitioning from like a middle school to a high school, you know, elementary into school or whatever it is, to say like, do you guys have an agreement? Do you know where the kiddo's going to school? Have you started the enrollments ASAP? Have you filled out all the forms? Because you don't want to be in this situation.
Yeah, that is great advice. And okay, a couple things. One, did the kid have any say in the matter?
No. So when we're talking about like kids and they having a say, some people will be like, well, when they're like 16, they get to decide what they want. And to some extent, there's some truth to that, right? Like when a kiddo is 16, 17, maybe even 15, there's not a lot you're going to be able to tell them.
Yeah.
They're going to have a mind of their own, but they don't legally get to make decisions for themselves. It's up to the parents or the court if you guys can't decide, what's going to happen. And so, especially when we're talking about school too, it's really going to be a parent decision. And then obviously, if they can't agree, somebody's going to have to make the decision for them. I have seen situations with picking a school where, the kiddo will have a ton of friends going to X, Y, and Z school. And so that might be taken into consideration. I want to go to this school and stay with all my friends and X, Y, and Z. And it can certainly be taken into consideration. And I do think most parents will take that into consideration, like where would my kid be most comfortable? But I do know at the end of the day, a lot of it is where can my kid get the best education? I want my kid to thrive in school and have, all the opportunities available to them. Do they have a say in it? Yeah, a kid's always going to have a say in it. It's their life too. Is it a legally binding say? No, not necessarily.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you this. Would it have been better? And I'm really asking because I'm not asking like knowing the answer because I don't. Would it have been better for them to spell out the school earlier, like when they were writing the agreement up to spell it out then, so that would not be something that they're having to decide? Or is that not a good idea to be that specific in writing something like that up?
I mean, that's a great question. I always kind of oscillate between how specific do we get, how not specific do we get. When you get super specific in an agreement, you pigeonhole your client. That's the thing that they have to do. It's in the agreement. Now, there's always that magic word, like, unless otherwise agreed upon. So, like, the parties are free to pick something else. Does that happen often? No. That's why we have a custody order in place.
Right.
So, to the respective schools, I think I've not written a custody order with a specific school put in place as they get older. I think a lot of that is because, especially in the CMS area, it's so dependent on where the parents live. And then, like I said, there's some schools that are lottery schools. There's some schools, or maybe the kid's in public school and the parents want to go private at some point, or vice versa, right? So I think when you put a school in this specific instance, if I put a specific school, I'd be a little bit worried, can they even get into that school if it's a lottery school? Something along those lines. So I think for this specific instance, it worked, the process worked really well. I wish we would have done
it was just a time period.
Right. So, they both wanted two excellent schools. And it was just a matter of like, which one do we pick? And ultimately an arbitrator had to pick. But I'm glad in this instance, and I think in most instances, I'd be glad to not put a school in there just because of the logistics of can you even get into that school?
Right.
And I don't ever want to put something in order that my client necessarily can't do.
Right.
I don't want to set them up to fail on a specific point.
No, I completely agree. And, as a CDRE, I see court orders come through all the time. And in the real estate portion, I cringe at times because I feel like a lot of attorneys have wording that they've used in
Mm-hmm.
every court order in the last 15 years that they just put down every
Mm-hmm.
time. And it's not always in the best interest of their clients just because the market changes so much and so often. And it's not y'all's job to keep up with the real estate market. It isn't. And y'all are great at family law and doing all of that kind of stuff. But I say this almost like in every podcast, but we all can't be experts in every field. That's why
Mm-hmm.
we all have experts in different fields. And, like something that I always, if I'm ever asked, which is not very often, but if I'm ever asked, like even putting a date of when personal property for the person who has left the house,
Mm-hmm.
date to be put in there that it has to be taken out by.
Yeah.
Going ahead and naming a realtor. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't want to use me as a CDR, but any realtor, go ahead and name it. Because I always tell people in these second Saturday workshops that I do, and I'm going over some of the stuff, I'm like, let me tell you about some court verbiage that I hear that you may want to tell your attorney, this crazy girl at Second Saturday mentioned this. But yeah, but anyway, I'm getting off
No,
key.
no. See, like when we met, you were talking about court verbiage that you kind of like cringed at. And I had been like, oh, sometimes use that in my orders, especially when I'm doing like a sale of the house. And
Mm-hmm.
and obviously my practice has evolved over the years, but I've really changed in my orders. Like if we're selling a house, how all of that is laid out. Like it used to be like, just a couple paragraphs. And now it's this kind of like
Yes.
whole thing. And then a lot of it was if X do Y, if
Yeah.
Y do Z. And I've left a little bit of room in there for the realtor because I've realized
Yes.
after
Good for
talking with
you.
you. Well, because it was when I was talking to you and you were like, the realtor is then kind of bound by that, and that might not be what's great for the market. And so, like,
Exactly. That's
yes, I'm
exactly
not an expert in real estate at all.
right.
We have had to, and I will say, I think a lot of us have probably run into this is, when we're doing a divorce and a separation and we've got a house, we've either got to like refinance or sell the house. Really, those are kind of your two main options.
Mm-hmm.
And we really have to track the market, especially now, like interest rates are high. Do we have a client that can afford to refinance?
Right.
Is your mortgage going to go from that, sweet COVID rate to a 6%? And then are you in selling season? Are you in buying season for a house? And this market has just in the last year just
Yeah.
fluctuated.
I mean, it is changing as we speak.
Yes.
Houses are setting for longer periods of time. It is shifting from a seller's market to a buyer's market.
Mm-hmm.
The interest rates are ever so slightly inching down, which is kind of bringing some more buyers into the
Mm-hmm.
market.
Yeah.
So it is, yeah, I mean, it's just changing. And, it's, and this, I mean, you do contact me for things and ask questions. Tell everybody if you ever have any questions. I have people that are mediators that are like writing things up and they'll slip out and call me and like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing mediation. How should I write this up for, dealing with the real
Yes.
estate portion? And
Yeah.
I don't mind at all. I don't mind at all
I
doing
have
stuff.
a mortgage lender and we were just doing wording with assumption of mortgage. And I had to
Exactly.
call her up and be like, can I actually do this?
Yeah.
Is this actually a thing?
Yeah.
And she was like, lovely. She picked up right away. But yeah, like I'm not afraid to be like, I don't know if I can actually put that verbiage in there. So let me talk to the person that's a
Yeah.
professional
Well,
and can.
you're good because you're one of the minority. You're one of the minority. Okay, let me ask you one more thing about this because everybody who's listening may not know. You said you had to hurry up and do arbitration.
Mhm.
Can you explain what arbitration is for people that may not understand?
Yes. So it's an alternative dispute resolution. So when, we can't make a decision and we need to find an alternative on how to work out the decision. In the family law world, we really have like two different alternative dispute resolutions that we talk about most. And one of them's arbitration. And then the other one you probably hear a ton is mediation. And it's a pretty much essentially the same process with like two very different results. So generally both of them it's an out of court process. So we're not in court, we're not in front of a judge, we're in front of a neutral third party. There's great mediators and arbitrators in Charlotte. A lot of them are, older family law attorneys have been doing this for tons of years, have great experience under their belts. Some of them are retired judges in the family court system, and they really cater to like the mediation arbitration. And so specifically, so that person's, a neutral third party. They don't work for either party. They are not representing either party. They're there to either make a decision or help them come to a decision, the two parties. So specifically arbitration, it is more of a courtroom feel because at the end of the day, the arbitrator actually makes a decision.
That you have to live by.
Exactly. The parties will, in this instance, I want to go to school A, I want to go to school B. You tell the arbitrator all of your reasons why, your pros, your cons. I want to go to this school, I don't want to go to this school. And then at the kind of the end of the day, the arbitrator is going to make a decision. And that decision's binding on the parties. And so I really prefer arbitration in a lot of respects because in a situation, especially like what we had, they need a decision.
Right.
They need to leave there with an actual decision and know how to go forward. And if they don't have one, then we're just kind of stuck in the same circle. And so that's the big difference between arbitration and mediation. So mediation's the same sort of process I talked to you about, a neutral third party. But in this instance, they're not making a decision. They're going to help the two parties come together. So the way I explain it to my client when we do a mediation is you and I are in this room, your other party and the other attorney are in this room, and you've got the mediator going back and forth. And he's trying or she's trying to really get everyone to the middle. Everyone's going to compromise. Nobody's going to leave with like a slam dunk offer. And nobody has to agree to anything. You could spend an entire day in mediation and walk away with nothing on paper. I would say that's rare, but it does happen because they just can't agree. And in that instance, for the mediation specific purpose of it, then the next step is to just go in front of a judge. If you can't get to the point where y'all agree, unless there's, another mediation session or whatever it is, we're going to go in front of a judge then. If y'all can't agree, that's just kind of the next step. So I really like arbitration. There's actually a case I did last year where instead of going in front of the judge, we took it to arbitration, and it was just a less formal process. I think there's a lot less pressure on the parties too. There's just something about walking into a courtroom and walking in front of a judge. So I absolutely get it. And so it can be more cost effective too, both alternative dispute resolutions. Going to trial is always going to be very expensive. You're paying for your attorney, sometimes the second chair, sometimes the paralegal. You're paying for all the prep work. And so I know we're like getting into the weeds of it.
No, I think that's good though, because the arbitration is not something that a lot of people know.
Mm-mm. No.
And the more I hear about it, I feel like it is a good alternative.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're saying this too, because when I hear arbitration in my little common mind of being non-law whatsoever, when I hear arbitration, I think of almost like private court.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
it's really the same thing as court,
Yeah.
and you get to pick, and I don't know how, I guess you and the other attorney kind of pick the arbitrator,
Yes.
the judge, whoever, the person who's going to be acting as judge.
Yes.
You guys pick them, but then you do have to pay for that judge.
You
I mean,
do.
you're paying, and I'm sure they're not cheap because they're bringing a lot of experience and years to there, but you're making what you were just saying, you're making a good point, because that
Yeah.
seems like, gosh, I could go in front of a regular judge and not have to pay, but you're talking about everything else that you
Yeah.
would be paying if you were inside a courtroom.
And not that our family law judges, specifically in MEC, because that's just where I practice a ton, they're great. They know their stuff. They've, been on the bench now for a couple years with the newer judges that we have. But I think there's something about maybe just like an older attorney with like, some of them will have, I've had 20 years of experience doing this. I think sometimes clients maybe feel a little bit better. That's a person who's seen it all, done it all, practiced it. So they've been in front of a judge, they've done the family law litigation and all that stuff. I know for the huge arbitration I had a year or two ago, my guy just felt super comfortable with the arbitrator. And it worked out really well. There's definitely a cost to it. I'm never going to go in and say like, it's really affordable because sometimes it's not. Like I've had a 3-day
Mhm.
arbitration, I've had a 1-day arbitration, I've had a half day. But when you also, some of the other things to think about with arbitration is yes, you absolutely have to pay for the arbitrator. I don't know anybody out there that does it for free.
Yeah.
And so you're paying for your attorneys, you're paying for the arbitrator. A lot of times it is cost splitting. The arbitrator is free to apportion costs. Typically, if that's in your arbitration agreement, they can apportion the costs. But the other thing is, when you're doing arbitration, you probably want to record it. So if you need a professional recording services, because you want to have a record of it. Otherwise, there's no record of your case. So when you go to court, the court will record it. You can always just request a copy of your court hearing, and the court sends you a digital link or whatever it is to the recording because it's actually recorded. So that's free. But if you're in a private setting, you're going to want to pay for someone to be there to record. I did have a case where we used like a private, just like a handheld recorder. And at the end of the case, we just switched it back and forth, like sent the link to everybody to have the recording for that day. But you definitely want it recorded because you can appeal an arbitration award. It's very rare, but you can appeal it. And if you're going to do that, then you need a record of what you guys actually did.
So when I said private court, it literally is.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a
Because
great term.
if you're litigating in a regular courtroom, everything is public. Anybody could go look up the transcripts or
Yes,
whatever,
exactly.
in, wherever you go, register of deeds or wherever you go to do
Yeah.
that. And, but in arbitration, so if you really wanted private case, then you really could. That would be the way to go.
Yeah, and that's a great,
That's probably what
great
a
point.
lot of like movie celebrities and stuff like that, they probably do that, don't they, to keep it out of.
I've never read a celebrity transcript, so I think they either have their records sealed in court, which makes them like not public. In North Carolina, all family court is public record except juvenile court. That's always going to be like kind of a sealed record. But then with Odyssey, which is our online portal system now, like Mecklenburg has launched, Union County has launched. I think Gaston's coming in October. Don't quote me on that one. But we've got these counties moving towards e-portals and e-courts.
Mm-hmm.
And that has made it so much more accessible for people to get their court case. All you've got to do is look up a party name and their whole court case is right in front of you.
Wow.
So for me as an attorney, it's great. If I have a consult coming in and I know they have active litigation, I can pull up their portal and check the pleadings, see what's going on. On the flip side, all of your information is public. You would always be able to go down to the courthouse and request a file. So years ago, before all of this happened, if we had a consult come in and we knew they had a case, I would send a courier down and say, here's the file number, copy all of it. I think a lot of us can remember going into like the Mecklenburg copy room and there's like one copier and you've got to get the key and then you got to get the file and then you got to copy it all and take out all the staples and then restaple it. So it's like this whole process and your client's paying for that whole process too. And that was like, pre-portal. So it's all public. You can absolutely go down and still get it. And now that everything's online, it's definitely great for me.
Right.
And then filing is online too, so I don't got to send a courier down. But for the general public, you can just go search it. If the county that they're in is active on portal, and like I said, MEC is, Union is, the other counties are coming. The whole state, I believe that's the plan. The whole state will go to e-portal, e-court filing, and it has its pros and cons for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, speaking as you were talking about the school, and it is getting to be that season, and probably by the time this is published, they will be back in school. But what are some advice in transitioning with schools and all of that kind of stuff? What would you say to parents?
So specifically moving from summer into school, and I'm going to talk about this in the context of obviously there being I'm going to call it an order, but it could be an out of court contract or it could be a court order, but I'm just going to say order for the sake of keeping it easy.
Yeah.
But check your order. So I see a ton of times a custody schedule will be different in the summer. And then in the school, it might, switch. Maybe we go to a week on, week off in the summer to maybe every other weekend or, a 10-4 or something along those lines. And so we see that switch. So one, check your order to make sure there's a switch. And then if there is a switch, make sure you know when it actually happens. So more often than not, we don't see a switch on like the first day of school. So I'll put in my order, if there's one parent who kind of has more custody during the school year, I'll put, a week before school, we're switching back to this schedule, or like the Sunday before the first week of school or something like that. So absolutely, like, you got to check your calendar. You got to look and make sure you're on the same page too, because you don't want to get in a situation where I think it starts Saturday, I think it starts Sunday, and then you're just bickering. So I always say during the summer, get prepared for school. I know we don't want to think about school necessarily, but especially as we get closer, like, make sure you're calendaring. I'm such a big fan of putting everything on a calendar. It's just going to make everybody's life easier.
I agree.
And so if you've got that transition into different schedules, just make sure you're checking that order to see when it starts, what the schedule is. If you're on a 10-4 schedule, a 6-8 schedule, then really say, like, start mapping it out. You can download a calendar online, and I literally have just gone through and highlighted days for my client. So if that's something that works, if you're more of a visual person, I highly recommend doing that as you switch into the school year.
That is such great advice. I have never heard anyone say that before, but I mean, that makes so much sense. And that just goes straight to my heart because I am such a organizational girl. I don't like leaving anything. I told you before the podcast started that the older I get, the more I learn that I'm a control freak, and
Yeah.
I'm owning up to that. I am. But see, that I love leaving nothing to chance, and that people say that takes all the fun out of life. But I mean, I just like knowing, I like planning, and my kids are grown, so and they were grown when I got divorced, so I didn't have to worry about that stuff. But for people that do have to worry about that, to plan ahead like that, because it takes so much pressure off of you. Because if you've got it laid out, it just, like, I would have been a nervous wreck, those people that were trying to get their kid in school
Yeah.
at the last minute. That would have
The other
driven me
thing too
crazy.
is the school year is going to have all your holidays. There's not a ton of holidays in the summer. I mean, we've got July 4th is kind of the big one, but a lot of your holiday schedule is in the school year. And so making that calendar ahead of time, like, even just, here's when school starts, here's when the new schedule starts if we're changing, then you can put in your holidays. Because a lot of orders will have holiday switching. You get odd years, I get even years. So a lot of that you're going to need to really say, like, put it in a calendar. Obviously, if you need it in front of your face, print it out. And then the other thing too is we switch. And I think it sounds like very common sense, but it is something to, like, think about. But your school year is going to start in 2025, but we're going to end in 2026. And so when you've got an order that's switching, right, you get odd, I get even, it's not a full school year. We're talking about, a calendar year. And so some holidays that are going to be in 2025, we're going to switch over to 2026. So just make sure you're reading your order correctly and not thinking about it in terms of, like, it's a school calendar year. No, we're talking about an actual numbered 2025, numbered 2026. So I think just putting it on paper too, you're going to avoid that, oops, it's the wrong year type thing.
No, that is such good practical advice. I love that. Is there anything that we missed that you would want to, as we round up here, is there anything that you didn't get to say that you wanted to?
So specifically as it relates to school, some things I think that are really important to remember are exchanges of kids, so sometimes your custody order will say, we'll meet halfway or something along those lines. But then as you get into the school year, it might switch and say you pick up from school, you drop off at school. So just with exchanges, make sure you're figuring that out and know which school do you go to. Do you have kids at multiple schools? Is pickup at time here and time here? So if you've got, multiple kiddos at multiple schools, and that your exchanges are changing, just make sure you're planning for that. Generally, with most orders, parents can participate in all school functions, all extracurriculars. So even if it's not your parenting time, go to the basketball game, go to the baseball game, go to the choir concert, just sit next to each other. And then I think the big thing that I'm seeing right now is so much conflict with, there's this school event, you didn't put it on the calendar, but they're both getting notifications. So I know there's, all the school apps that we're using now for the kids. So make sure, you're signed up for it as a parent. It's not your job to make sure the other parent is signed up for it, but it is nice to reach out and say like, hey, did you get signed up, such that we're both getting notifications, right?
And that's a really good point.
Because you don't want to run into a situation where it's like, you didn't put the graduation on the calendar, or you didn't put the choir concert on the calendar. And then it's like, but have you signed up for the parenting app?
Yeah.
So minimizing that, even just on your end, right? Like make sure you're signing up for things, make sure you're on emails with the teachers, reach out. And then the other big thing is, and I know not every case is amicable, there's usually some tension in a relationship, but if you're emailing the school and saying, hey, my kid got a bad grade, what can we do to help? Just put the other parent on the email. You are going to avoid so much conflict with, you didn't include me on this email. I don't know what's going on here. How can I know what's going on if you don't put me on an email? And I know sometimes it's just like, second nature to just maybe leave that person off, but really in the school year, just try and be very cognizant about keeping both parents in the loop. So that's going to require a little bit of effort to make sure that everyone's signed up. If you're emailing, make sure people are on the emails, because I just see so much conflict when there's that lack of communication between that. And, it's not your responsibility to make sure the other parent is showing up and being a parent, but where you can communicate and minimize conflict, always the better.
That is such good advice. And I think back, I'm not even going to go there, but that's really, that's really good advice. It really is, because it may even be something you don't want to do. It's like one of those things like, well, they should take responsibility and sign up for that app or whatever it is. But sometimes you just got to be like, you know what? Yeah, let's just do this so that down the road we're not fighting about this. So
it's
that
like,
makes so much sense.
I'm going to be the bigger person. I'm going to take the high road. And believe me, I get clients that are like, I don't want to take the high road anymore.
Exactly.
Why does it always have to be me? And I totally understand that. I totally get it. But the more the parents are in conflict, especially when we're talking about school, right? The more it's just going to affect the kiddo.
Yeah.
And so I get it. Believe me, there's communications that I read and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is painful. Like I feel for my client, or like my client could be doing a little bit more work, but really all of that's going to start impacting the kid. If we're not communicating and people aren't showing up for parent teacher, if people aren't showing up for extracurricular, parents, that really starts impacting the kiddo.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
you're
then
exactly right.
You really don't want to get into a situation where we're playing the blame game, especially in front of the kid. So I know that sometimes it is like, take a deep breath and put the other parent on the email, but you can do it. I promise you can do it.
Yeah, I know you've seen it. In family law, y'all have all seen a lot. So, well, I cannot thank you enough. You have given some great practical advice for anybody that is listening, and especially with going back to school. I may have to bump you up on the list to get this out while school is starting, since this is such good timing. But thank you so much for coming on today and taking time, because I know that you're very busy, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Any time I get a chance to talk about work, I love it. Like I said, most of us family law attorneys, it is an incredibly stressful job, but it can be very rewarding, and I love it. I love what we do.
Well, I am going to put your information for those that's watching the video at the end, but for those that might just be listening, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So you can always call the office, just go on our website and our number's on there. So you can always call the office. We can get you set up for consultations with any of the attorneys. You can email too. I don't know if you want me to say it or
that'd be great. Yeah,
so
say it.
My email is Bethany. It's my first name. So BETHANY MCHPLLC.com. So you can always email me if it's a situation where, you want to set up a consultation. I'm happy to chat with you, and then I get you set up with our intake team, and we'll get you rocking and rolling.
That's great. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was good to see you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The information contained herein is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, please seek an attorney.